Alexandre Cabanel painted Cleopatra in 1887. She reclines across a leopard skin on what appears to be a floating barge or a draped terrace above the Nile. The locale is Orientalist fantasy, and the architecture is the visual language of 19th-century Paris, imagining Egypt. And her posture is one of absolute, almost aggressive ease. Her head rests on one hand. Her gaze travels down toward the scene below her with the mild interest of a woman watching a mediocre theatrical performance. Below her, on the lower register of the canvas, prisoners are dying. They are dying from the various poisons she has administered to them in the course of an experimental program she is conducting to determine which substance produces the most desirable death. Most desirable meaning, in the logic of the historical anecdote Cabanel is illustrating, the death that is most peaceful, most painless, most aesthetically acceptable for the person she plans to use the poison on next, which is herself. She is researching her own suicide. She's doing it by killing other people. She's doing it in a gown that has slipped considerably off her shoulder, and she looks bored. Tihee painting is one of the most unhinged images in the history of French academic art, which is a meaningful bar because French academic art, in the second half of the 19th century, was a tradition in which painters regularly produced canvases full with creepy weirdness and called them history painting, and hung them in enormous gold frames at the salon, and sold them to wealthy men who put them in rooms where they would be looked at over brandy. What Cabanel made is a painting about a woman researching her own death by watching other people die. This is a completely literal description of the subject matter, and it sounds like the premise of a psychological thriller, because it is the premise of a psychological thriller, except the thriller is set in ancient Egypt and painted with the luminous technical perfection. The leopard skin is rendered with an accuracy that would satisfy a zoologist. The beads on the attendants' costumes catch individual points of light. The dying prisoners below the queen are given the same careful attention, the same luminous, deliberate care as the queen above them, and this technical equality the painter gives is the only honest thing happening on the canvas. Stand in front of it long enough, and the initial interpretation, beautiful, dangerous woman, dying men, exotic setting, standard Orientalist erotic spectacle, begins to complicate itself. The woman on the barge is watching her prisoners with the focused attention of a person for whom the outcome is already settled, and the only remaining question is practical. She has decided to die. The decision is behind her. What lies before her is preparation, and she is conducting the preparation with the systematic thoroughness that the historical sources, even the hostile ones, consistently attribute to everything she did. Cleopatra, as a woman engaged in the final act of sovereign self-determination, researching her own death with the rigour she brought to statecraft, makes the painting disturbing, and it makes her more human, which is why it sits so uncomfortably alongside the tradition Cabanel was working in. She chose her death the way she made every decision, by looking at the available options until one of them became obviously correct. Octavian was the first powerful man she had ever encountered, who wanted nothing from her except her humiliation. Every other negotiation in her life had leverage in it somewhere, because every other man had desire in him somewhere, for her intelligence, her kingdom, her body, her conversation, the specific frequency at which she understood them. She had spent 20 years finding that frequency in powerful men and broadcasting on it, and it had worked every time. Octavian sat across from her and she found nothing to work with. He was cold in the administrative way, the way of a man who has already decided and is simply completing paperwork. He wanted to parade her through Rome in chains so that Rome could see what his victory looked like. That was all. She had survived everything by being indispensable. The moment she was no longer indispensable, she became a prop, and she had zero intention of being a prop for someone else's story after spending her entire life authoring her own. So she chose, and the choice was the recognition that the parade and the prison and the death on Roman terms were what lay ahead if she waited, and that she could have the death on her own terms if she moved first. She was 40 years old and she had run every calculation available to her, and this was the one that preserved the most. Her dignity, her children's safety, Egypt's narrative, and the thing she had always guarded most carefully, which was the right to decide what happened next. The character behind this decision is almost entirely lost under 2,000 years of painting her as a seductress undone by passion. The real character was warmer and funnier, and considerably colder in the strategic registers than the legend allows. She loved Antony genuinely, and she also understood that the alliance with Antony was Egypt's best available option against Rome, and she never seemed to find these two truths difficult to hold simultaneously, because she had grown up in a court where love and strategy were the same conversation. She was loyal, she was witty, she was capable of great tenderness, and she could watch the political situation with the detachment of a chess player who understands that emotion and analysis are both tools, and the skill is knowing which one the moment requires. What Octavian took from her was the moment. Every moment before him had been navigable because every person before him was susceptible to something, and susceptibility is the raw material of power for someone whose instrument is persuasion. He was susceptible to zero. He looked at her and saw a logistical problem. She looked at him and saw the end of the game. She spent the remaining weeks preparing, until the last available hour, exactly who she had always been: thorough, systematic, in control of the variables she could still control. The death she chose was the quietest available option, the one that looked most like sleep, the one that left her face the way she wanted it found. Even the staging was deliberate, dressed, composed, arranged. Octavian arrived and she was already gone, and she had timed it that way. That is the character in the painting. The boredom on her face above the dying prisoners is the boredom of someone who has already made the largest decision and is now attending to the details, and the details are being handled with the same care she gave everything, because that was who she was, and who she was did not change because the situation had become impossible. The situation had always been impossible. She had been making the impossible navigable since she was 18 years old, and when she finally encountered the version of impossible that had zero navigation in it, she accepted it with the composure of someone who had always known this was among the available outcomes and had simply been living fully until it arrived. This is where Cabanel's painting finds her. The negotiations with Octavian had failed. He was immune to her. She had, according to Plutarch, been investigating the methods available to her, testing poisons on condemned prisoners to find the one that would accomplish the exit she required: certain, painless, dignity-preserving, free of the convulsions and distortions that most substances produced. She found the asp most satisfactory. The bite produced a drowsiness, a gentle fading, a passage from consciousness to its absence that looked from the outside like sleep and felt, presumably, like very little. Paris in the 1880s was a city in the grip of a sustained cultural obsession with the deadly woman, the beautiful destroyer, the femme fatale in her various ancient avatars. Salome danced across the walls of the salon in the paintings of Gustave Moreau, and then of Gustave Adolphe Mossa, and then of a dozen lesser painters who understood that the decapitating dancing girl was the image of the decade. Judith appeared with Holofernes' head with the regularity of a commuter train. Delilah wielded her scissors. Medea stood over her children. And Cleopatra above all, because Cleopatra combined every quality the obsession required, presided over dying men, on barge after barge after barge, in canvas after canvas, at salon after salon. Sarah Bernhardt played her on stage in Victorian Sardou's drama. The femme fatale on stage and canvas was a vessel for a cultural conversation about female power that the culture could hold in the safe distance of history and legend and the Orient. And Cleopatra was the supreme version of the vessel. The conversation was about what to do with the fact that intelligent women existed and wanted things and had the capacity to get them. This is a blunter formulation than the 19th century would have preferred, but it is what the paintings are circling. France in the 1880s was a society in which women had recently acquired certain legal rights and were visibly present in public life in ways that were producing real anxiety in the men who had organised the public sphere around the premise of their absence. The femme fatale as an image was a way of acknowledging female power and simultaneously neutralising it. The powerful woman is also fatal, her power inseparable from her danger, her beauty inseparable from her destructiveness. The beautiful, dangerous woman is contained within the image, pinned to the canvas by the male gaze that both desires her and warns against her, made available for contemplation from the safe position of the viewer who holds the frame. She is magnificent, and she is doomed. This is the contract. Cabanel illustrated it with remarkable technical perfection and complete structural compliance. And then, because he was a better painter than the contract required, put a presence inside the contract that the contract was designed to prevent. The presence inside the contract is the expression on her face, and the expression is the painting's entire moral and psychological life. She is bored in the way that a person is bored when they have been attending to a large reality for long enough that the reality has become ordinary, and the ordinariness is familiarity over callousness, but the particular composure of someone who has done the emotional work in advance. She has sat with the fact of her death. She has sat with it until it has become a fact she can look at directly. The way you eventually become able to look at a very bright light, by approaching it incrementally, spending time with it each day until the brightness is familiar enough to bear free of blinking. The boredom is the face on the other side of that process. It is the face of acceptance that has moved past acceptance into a practical relationship with what is accepted. The deaths below her are data. The data confirms what she already knew. This stands apart from cruelty. Cruelty requires taking pleasure in the suffering of others, and the expression on Cleopatra's face in Cabanel's painting contains zero pleasure. There is the complete absence of distress, which the tradition reads as cold indifference, and which is actually the face of a person who has arranged their relationship to an unavoidable reality with great personal discipline. There is the mild interest of the observer, which is a tool over an emotion. The attention she's paying to the dying men is the attention of someone learning a necessity, the attention of someone learning over enjoying a spectacle. And there is, around the eyes, a quality that the academic tradition's visual vocabulary had zero design for depicting, and that Cabanel may have placed there accidentally, may have placed there because he was too good a painter to suppress what the subject suggested. The expression of a person who is very tired and has decided to rest. The serpent armlet on her upper arm is the painting's most concentrated piece of thinking, the detail that earns the most reward from attention. She wears an asp, the very animal that will, according to the story the painting's illustrating, deliver the method she is currently evaluating for suitability. The future is on her arm in the form of jewellery. She's wearing the instrument of her death as an ornament. She has already incorporated the ASP into the grammar of her self-presentation. The death is already part of how she appears in the world, coiled on her upper arm at every audience, every negotiation, every meal. The decision has been so thoroughly made that its instrument has become decoration. She's been wearing her death for months. The prisoners below her are helping her understand it better. There is a compositional logic to the painting that rewards sustained looking as much as the symbolic details do. Cabanel divides the canvas horizontally into two registers. Cleopatra in the upper half, her reclining form creating a diagonal that draws the eye across the picture plane with the practiced ease of a painter who has spent a career learning how to move a viewer's attention. The prisoners in the lower half, their bodies arranged in postures of expiring that vary from the peacefully collapsed to the more troubled. Between them, an attendant fans the queen with an enormous feather. Another attendant kneels at her feet. A small figure sits in the middle ground with the slightly generalised quality of Orientalist extras, present to establish the wealth and exoticism of the setting over existing as individual people. The compositional hierarchy is explicit. Everything below the queen is below her, literally and figuratively, arranged to serve her sightline, to offer itself to her gaze, to confirm her position at the apex of the composition. This vertical hierarchy is the painting's most honest political statement, and it goes mostly unremarked because the Orientalist spectacular has trained the eye to look at the top of the hierarchy, at the luminous, beautiful queen, and to treat everything below as atmospheric texture. The dying prisoners are rendered with the same care that Cabanel gives to Cleopatra's skin, the same attention to the specificity of flesh and bone, and the way light falls across a human form. But the composition places them below. In service, their death's the research material for the woman who holds the elevated position. They are persons made into data, which is the cruelest political act that power performs, and Cabanel depicts it with the calm accuracy of a man who has organised his entire canvas around the same hierarchy, free of appearing to notice that the organising principle is the political horror his painting is supposedly illustrating. The three prisoners are worth looking at individually because they resist the atmospheric treatment the composition encourages. The one who lies on his back in the most peaceful posture, the one who looks most like sleep, has a face of considerable dignity the face of a person who has arrived at the end of the available evidence free of having resolved anything. The one in a more troubled posture has the quality of a body that remains in the process of negotiating with what is happening to it, and the negotiation has the particular pathos of a process that is going to end only one way, and has arrived at zero acceptance of this. The third figure is further into the dying, and has the stillness of someone for whom the negotiation is concluding. Together they represent the stages of the passage Cleopatra is studying, and each stage is a window she is looking through to understand what comes next on the other side of the aspite she is planning for herself. The Egypt in which all of this takes place is the Egypt of the imagination, which is the only Egypt that was available to Cabanel, because the Egypt of the imagination was what the tradition had given him, and the tradition was what the market required. The warm amber light that saturates the canvas from above and behind, the distant palms in soft focus, the lotus columns that appear at the margins, the general quality of golden haze that served throughout the 19th century as the visual shorthand for antiquity in the Orient. All of this is a stage set assembled from accumulated fantasy over from observation. Cabanel had zero first-hand experience of Egypt. He painted his Egypt from the paintings of other painters, who had also painted their Egypt from the paintings of other painters, the Orientalist tradition sustaining itself through internal reference with the circular self-sufficiency of any closed system. This matters because the real Egypt, in which the real Cleopatra lived and died, was a considerably stranger and more complicated place than the amber light fantasy suggests. The court she presided over was a Hellenistic Greek in its orientation, Greek philosophy, Greek aesthetics, Greek court ritual, Greek as the language of administration and intellectual life. The Mouseion at Alexandria, the great research institution that her dynasty had founded and maintained, was the closest thing the ancient world produced to a research university, housing scholars who were advancing mathematics and astronomy and medicine and geography and literary theory, with the systematic ambition of people who believed that human knowledge was capable of indefinite expansion. Cleopatra herself was a product of this institution in the broadest sense, educated in its orbit, in conversation with its scholars, a patron of its work. She wrote treatises on cosmetics and gynecology that were cited by later ancient physicians, which tells you a great deal about the range of her intellectual interests and about the culture she moved in. A culture where a queen writing medical text was sufficiently unremarkable to be recorded as a fact over a marvel. The lotus columns in Cabanel's painting are aesthetically Egyptian in the visual shorthand of the period, but culturally wrong in the way that most details in history paintings are culturally wrong. They serve the viewer's expectations over the historical record. Cleopatra would have been more at home in a library than on an Orientalist barge. The conversations she found most interesting were probably with astronomers and mathematicians over the attendants who appear in the painting, fanning her and kneeling at her feet. The image of the languorous queen reclining in golden light is the image her enemies preferred, and that her admirers, paradoxically, perpetuated, because the image of the brilliant administrator who learned 9 languages and managed a kingdom and wrote medical treatises is a harder image to sell than the beautiful, dangerous woman on the barge. Cabanel's barge is what the market wanted, and the market in 1887 was a market saturated with Cleopatra. The theatrical productions, the operas, the novels, the paintings, the Cleopatra industry of the 1880s was producing versions of the Queen at a rate that suggests the culture was finding her useful for purposes that went beyond historical interest. She was a vessel for anxieties about female intelligence, female sexuality, female power, and the East. All 4 pressures concentrated in a single image, manageable because she was past, comprehensible because she was painted, contained because she was framed. The amber light and the leopard skin and the slightly undressed shoulder were the packaging, and the packaging was designed to make the anxious content comfortable, to allow desire and fear to coexist within the pleasure of the aesthetic experience. You could desire Cleopatra and be warned against her in the same gaze, and the warning made the desire respectable, and the desire made the warning thrilling, and the whole transaction happened in 20 seconds in front of a salon canvas and left you feeling pleasantly disturbed and uncertain of the source. What persists in Cabanel's painting past the terms of this transaction, what remains after the Orientalist packaging has been acknowledged and set aside, is the quality of the attention. The queen on the barge is paying very close attention to what is happening below her And the attention is the most human thing in the canvas. She is learning what she needs to know, and she's learning it from the bodies of men who are dying. And the awfulness of this arrangement is real, and the painting holds it free of flinching. It is an awful thing to use human lives as research material. It is also, in the logic of the situation the painting depicts, the only research material available for the particular question she is trying to answer, which is the question of how to die with dignity, which is the most private and the most universal question that a consciousness can hold. She is watching the dying men for the same reason that any thinking person watches the dying. To understand what the end of consciousness looks like from the outside, to prepare the inside accordingly, to carry into the final experience the maximum knowledge about what the final experience contains. What it is looking at is death. What the face around the looking says is, I have looked at this for long enough. I know its shape, I know how it arrives, I know what it does to the body, I know what the face looks like on the way through it. I have all the information I need, the research is complete. The men below me have given me what I came to find, and I am grateful to them in the way that a person is grateful for knowledge that costs them zero and costs its source everything. Which is to say, I am grateful in a way that is inseparable from a form of guilt. And the guilt is the weight behind the boredom. And the boredom is the face that the guilt wears when it has been present long enough to become familiar. The last thing to notice before moving away from the canvas and back into the museum's other rooms and eventually into the Antwerp street is the light. Cabanel painted the light of the Egyptian late afternoon with the warm accuracy of a tradition that had developed a precise visual grammar for this quality of illumination. The golden amber that falls across everything and makes everything beautiful, that makes even the dying men in the lower register look as though they are dying in the best possible light, that makes the queen and the leopard skin and the serpent arm that glow with the particular warmth of a world at the moment before dark. This light is the painting's most seductive element and its most deceptive one. It makes what is happening look like a painting of what is happening over the thing itself, and the gap between the representation and the reality is where the painting does its most important work. In the amber light, the death research is beautiful. In the amber light, the boredom is elegant. In the amber light, the serpent on the arm is jewellery, and the prisoners below are figures in a composition, and the queen is a queen, and the afternoon is an afternoon, and the barge is floating on the Nile, outside a city that has ceased to exist, in a world that has changed so completely that this moment seems safely past and safely other.